You think Sauron was the greatest evil Middle-earth ever faced? The Dark Lord, the enemy, the one who nearly conquered everything, who forged the ring, who commanded the Nine, who brought the world to the brink of destruction. You're wrong. Sauron was nothing compared to his master, compared to Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, the being who corrupted the world itself, who bred the Balrogs from fallen Maiar, who created dragons, who twisted elves into orcs, who waged war against the Valar themselves, against the powers who shaped creation. I know because I fought in the War of Wrath. I stood in the host of the Valar when they finally intervened, when they brought armies from Valinor to end Morgoth's reign, to break his power, to stop the evil that had consumed the world for thousands of years. I saw things that songs don't capture, things that stories can't convey. I saw Balrogs fall, saw dragons larger than mountains die screaming, saw Sauron, yes, Sauron himself, Morgoth's lieutenant, his chief servant, his most trusted weapon. I saw him flee, run, escape, while his master faced judgment, and I saw Morgoth, stood before him, watched the Valar chain the mightiest being in Middle-earth, watched them drag him from his throne, watched them cast him into the void, beyond the world, beyond time, beyond everything, punished, finally, completely, for everything he'd done, everything he'd corrupted, everything he'd destroyed. But his servant got away. Sauron escaped, hid, survived, and thousands of years later, thousands of years after we'd defeated the Master, after we'd ended the greatest evil the world had ever known, his lieutenant, his servant, his pale imitation, he rose. He became what you know, what you fear, what you call the Dark Lord. But he was nothing, compared to what we faced, compared to what we defeated, compared to Morgoth. My name is Goldor, a Sylvan elf who joined the host when I was barely 200 years old. I was young when the War of Wrath began, young by elven standards, old enough to fight, to see, to survive, to remember everything. This is what happened. This is what the War of Wrath was really like. Not the brief mentions in histories, not the songs, not the simplified tales. This is what it cost, what it took, what we faced, to defeat Morgoth, to end the First Age, to break the greatest evil, and let his servant escape to become your nightmare. Listen, because you need to understand, need to know. That what you faced in the Third Age, what Sauron brought, what the ring represented, it was an echo, a shadow, a fraction of what we fought, what we defeated, what we ended, a terrible cost, with consequences that reshaped the world, that destroyed entire lands, that ended the First Age in fire and flood and devastation beyond measure. But we won. We chained Morgoth. We cast him out. We ended him. And we let Sauron escape. The mistake that would haunt Middle-earth for ages, for millennia, until another war, another quest, another desperate struggle, to end what we should have finished, should have stopped, should have destroyed when we had the chance. I joined the host when I was barely 200 years old. Young, untested, eager, foolish. I'd lived in Beleriand all my life, seen Morgoth's power, seen the destruction, the wars, the kingdoms falling, the elves dying, the men fighting and failing, the dwarves hiding in their mountains, the slow grinding certainty that evil would win, that Morgoth's dominion would spread, that nothing could stop him, until the Valar came. They'd watched. For so long they'd watched, refused to intervene, refused to help, believing, hoping, that the children of Iluvatar, elves and men, we could handle it ourselves, could defeat Morgoth without their direct intervention, could prove ourselves worthy, capable, strong, but we couldn't. We tried. Gods we tried. For thousands of years we fought. We died. We failed. Kingdoms rose and fell. Heroes emerged and were broken. Everything we built, everything we hoped, everything we believed, Morgoth destroyed it, corrupted it, ended it, until Eärendil, half-elven, sailor, desperate man who took a ship, sailed west, found Valinor, begged the Valar, pleaded, showed them, made them understand that Middle-earth would fall, that Morgoth would win, that unless they helped, unless they intervened, unless they finally did something, everything would be lost, everyone would be corrupted, the world itself would become Morgoth's domain, forever. And they listened, they agreed, they came. I was in Lindon when the ships arrived, hundreds of them, thousands maybe, from Valinor, from the undying lands, carrying the host, the army of the Valar, elves who'd never seen Middle-earth, who'd lived in paradise, in peace, in perfection, coming to war, to fight, to end Morgoth, and Maiar. The Valar themselves didn't come, not all of them, but they sent their servants, their powers, beings like Morgoth had once been, before he fell, before he corrupted himself, before he became what he was, Eonwe, herald of Manwe, leading them, commanding them, bringing the full might of Valinor to bear against the Dark Lord. I volunteered immediately, joined the host, took my place among thousands, tens of thousands, the largest army ever assembled, elves from Valinor, elves from Middle-earth, united, finally, completely, to end Morgoth, to destroy his power, to break his armies, to free the world from his corruption. They gave us armor, weapons, blessed by the Valar, made in Valinor, better than anything forged in Middle-earth, better than anything Morgoth's forces possessed, swords that wouldn't break, mail that wouldn't pierce, shields that could withstand dragon fire, could turn aside Balrog whips, could protect against horrors we'd only heard about, only feared, only imagined. We marched north, toward Angband, toward Morgoth's fortress, toward the iron prison where he ruled, where he bred his monsters, where he corrupted the world, where he plotted his dominion, his victory, his eternal reign. And Morgoth knew we were coming, sent his armies to meet us, to stop us, to prove, to demonstrate that even the Valar's might, even their host, even everything they could bring, it wouldn't be enough, could never be enough, against him, against his power, against his thousands of years of preparation, of corruption, of darkness. The war lasted 40 years, 40 years, not days, not months, decades of fighting, of dying, of grinding slowly, painfully, toward Angband, toward Morgoth, toward the final confrontation, the ultimate battle, the end of everything, the first battle. I'll never forget it. We were confident, certain. We had the Valar's blessing, their weapons, their power. We were unstoppable, inevitable. Morgoth's forces would break, would flee, would fall before us like wheat before a scythe. We were fools. Morgoth sent the Balrogs. Not one, not a few, all of them. Every Balrog he possessed. Dozens of them. Ancient Maiar corrupted into weapons, into beings of fire and shadow and malice, larger than buildings, stronger than mountains, each one capable of destroying armies, of breaking kingdoms, of ending hope. I saw one up close, that first battle, towering, massive, wrapped in flames that didn't burn like normal fire, that consumed light itself, that made the air shimmer, that made breathing painful, made seeing impossible, made everything around it wrong, corrupted, touched by its mere presence. It had a whip, fire braided into rope, into weapon, into death. It swung, and men, elves, everyone in range. They died, not killed, unmade, reduced to ash, to nothing, to memory. The whip touched them, and they ceased. Just, gone, ended, destroyed so completely that nothing remained. We fought it. Hundreds of us, shooting arrows, throwing spears, attacking with swords, everything we had, everything we could. The arrows burned before reaching it. The spears melted, the swords, the brave, the foolish. Who got close enough? They died, screaming, burning, ending, until Eonwe came, the herald of Manwë, Maya himself, power to match the Balrog, maybe exceed it. He faced it, alone, while we fell back, watched, witnessed the clash of beings beyond us, beyond mortal, beyond anything except the Valar themselves. They fought, not with swords, not with weapons we understood, with power, with will, with the fundamental forces of creation itself, light against darkness, order against chaos, the world trembling, shaking, breaking, under the weight of their conflict. And Eonwe won, drove his light, his power, his absolute will, into the Balrog, through it, breaking it, destroying it, ending what Morgoth had made, what corruption had twisted, what evil had become. The Balrog fell, screamed, its fire guttering, its shadow dissolving, its existence over, finished, destroyed so completely it could never return, never reform, never threaten again. One down, dozens remaining, and that was just the Balrogs. Morgoth had dragons, had orcs beyond counting, had corrupted men, had trolls and wargs and creatures bred in darkness for one purpose, one goal: to kill, to destroy, to end us. The war ground on, battles, sieges, desperate struggles. We won. Mostly. The host was too strong, too blessed, too supported by the Valar to fail completely. But we didn't win easily, didn't win quickly, didn't win without cost. I saw friends die, saw elves from Valinor, who'd never known war, never experienced violence, never imagined the horror. I watched them break, fall, end, burning in dragon fire, crushed under troll clubs, torn apart by orcs, dead, gone. Paradise stolen from them, peace ended, innocence destroyed, by Morgoth's malice, by his refusal to surrender, by his absolute certainty that he could win, would win, should win, and the dragons, gods, the dragons, Ankalagon the Black, the greatest, the largest, the most terrible, a mountain that flew, that breathed fire hot enough to melt stone, that could destroy armies with a single pass, that made the Balrogs look small, manageable, survivable. Erendil fought him, in his ship, Vingilot, blessed by the Valar, bearing a Silmaril, one of the 3 sacred jewels, light from before the sun and moon, light that dragons, that evil, that Morgoth's corruption, couldn't stand, couldn't bear, couldn't face. They fought in the sky, ship against dragon, light against fire, hope against malice. I watched from the ground, saw them clash, saw Erendil drive his ship, his light, his desperate courage, into Ankalagon, into the great dragon's chest, his throat, his death. Ankalagon fell from the sky, screaming, dying. His body, his massive, impossible body, hit the mountains, hit Thangorodrim, the 3 peaks of Morgoth's fortress, and broke them, shattered them, brought them down. Mountains, ancient, eternal, destroyed by a falling dragon, by the corpse of Morgoth's greatest weapon, dead, ended, proof that even he, even Morgoth, even the Dark Lord, he could be beaten, his weapons destroyed, his power challenged, but it took 40 years. 40 years to break his armies, destroy his weapons, reach Angband itself, reach the fortress, reach Morgoth, reach the end. We breached Angband in the final year. The fortress that had stood for thousands of years, that had never fallen, that Morgoth believed could never fall. We broke it, smashed through gates, through walls, through defenses built over millennia, designed to stop gods, to resist the Valar themselves. The host poured in, thousands of us, following Eonwe, following the Maiar, following light into darkness, into the deepest, most corrupted place in Middle-earth, into Morgoth's heart, his domain, his power center, where he'd ruled, where he'd corrupted, where he'd built everything. The halls were wrong, not just dark, not just evil, wrong, twisted, the architecture itself corrupted, angles that hurt to look, at distances that didn't make sense, rooms larger inside than outside, corridors that looped, that repeated, that led nowhere, that led everywhere, that made navigation impossible, made advance terrifying, made every step uncertain, and defended. Every hall, every room, every corridor, orcs, trolls, Balrogs, everything Morgoth had left, everything that hadn't died in 40 years of war, concentrated here, defending their master, fighting to the end, to death, to final destruction. Because they knew what we came for, knew what would happen. If we won, if we reached Morgoth, if we ended him, they would fall too, would lose, would die, because without Morgoth, without his will holding them, directing them, giving them purpose, they were nothing, were broken things, were corruption without anchor. They'd dissolve, scatter, end. So they fought, desperately, absolutely, with nothing to lose, everything to lose, no hope except delaying, slowing, making us pay for every foot, every hall, every step closer to their master. I lost count of the dead, our dead, their dead, all dead, bodies piling up, burning, rotting, creating barriers we had to climb, had to cross, had to ignore, because stopping meant dying, meant failing, meant letting Morgoth win. Even now, even at the end, even when defeat was inevitable, he could still, might still, win. If we faltered, if we failed, if we stopped, we didn't stop, couldn't stop, pushed deeper, fought harder, lost more, but gained ground, gained halls, gained territory in the fortress, until finally, we reached it. The throne room, the heart of Angband, where Morgoth sat, where he ruled, where he waited, for us, for this, for the confrontation he'd known was coming, had prepared for, had something planned, some defense, some final gambit, some way to win, to survive, to escape. The doors, massive, black iron, covered in runes, in corruption, in power. They stood closed, sealed, warded against us, against entry, against defeat. Eonwe stood before them, raised his hand, spoke, words in Valorin, in the tongue of the Valar, words of power, of command, of truth. The doors, they cracked, groaned, resisted, but they opened, slowly, reluctantly, revealing what waited beyond. Darkness, complete darkness. Not absence of light, but presence of dark, active darkness. Darkness that pushed, that pressed, that tried to smother, to suffocate, to end. The light we brought, the courage we carried, the hope we held, and in that darkness, a presence, massive, overwhelming, ancient beyond measure, malevolent beyond description, Morgoth, the Dark Lord, the first, the greatest, the being who had sung in the music of the Ainur, who had helped shape the world, who had fallen, corrupted himself, become this presence, this darkness, this evil. We entered, the host, the bravest, the strongest, following Eonwe, following light into dark, into Morgoth's presence, into the end of everything, or the beginning, depending on who won, who lost, who survived. I saw him, finally, completely. Morgoth, Melkor, the Dark Lord, the enemy, sitting on his throne, iron, black, carved with images, horrible images, tortures, deaths, corruption, everything he'd done, everything he'd achieved, everything he'd become, displayed, celebrated, glorified. He was massive, larger than any being should be, larger than Balrogs, larger than dragons, larger than anything natural, anything right. He'd made himself, shaped himself, into something that radiated power, dominance, inevitability, that made you want to kneel, to submit, to accept that he was superior, unstoppable, destined to win. But he was also diminished, smaller than he should be, weaker than he'd been, because he'd poured his power, his essence, his very being, into the world, into corrupting it, into making Balrogs, dragons, orcs, everything twisted, everything evil. He'd spent himself, piece by piece, year by year, until what remained, what sat on that throne, it was still immense, still terrible, still more powerful than anything in Middle-earth. But it wasn't. A Valar. Not really. Not anymore. He'd reduced himself, weakened himself, made himself vulnerable in ways he hadn't been, in ways he'd never been before, and he knew it. I could see it, in his face, in his eyes, in the way he sat, not relaxed, not confident, not certain. He knew the host had come, knew the Valar had sent judgment, knew that he might actually lose his voice. When he spoke, it resonated, not sound, not words, but presence, will, force, pressing against us, against our minds, our spirits, our everything. You come, as thieves, as jealous, petty, powers unable to accept that I have made more, built more, achieved more than you ever could, would, dared. Eonwe stepped forward, light blazing around him, pushing back the dark, the corruption, the Morgoth. You have made nothing, Eonwe said, his voice clear, true, absolute. You have only twisted, corrupted, destroyed. You have broken what was made, changed what was pure, perverted what was good. You create nothing. You only... Ma. Morgoth stood, rose from his throne, and the room, the fortress, the world itself seemed to tremble, to shake under the weight, the presence, the power of what he was, what he had been, what he still commanded. I am Morgoth, he said, simply, absolutely, like it meant everything, like the name itself was power, was truth, was inevitable. I will not bow, will not submit, will not fall. You will, Eonwe said, because you are not what you were. You have diminished, weakened, spent yourself on hatred, on malice, on corruption. You cannot stand against the Valar's judgment, against their will, against us. Morgoth laughed. Not joy, not amusement, but contempt, scorn, absolute certainty that Eonwe, that all of us, we were wrong. You think, you believe, that numbers, that force, that righteous certainty will win. I have faced the Valar before, fought them, resisted them, survived them. You think, you, a herald, a servant, you can defeat me? Eonwe didn't answer with words. He answered with light, with power, with the full might of Manwë behind him, before him, through him. He blazed like the sun, like something beyond the sun, like creation itself, focused, directed, at Morgoth, and Morgoth. He met it, with darkness, with corruption, with malice given form. The two, light and dark, order and chaos, they clashed, not physically, not with weapons, but with being, with existence, with fundamental forces. That predated the world, that would outlast it, that were, are, will be, the eternal struggle between creation and corruption. The throne room shook, cracked, started to collapse. We, the host, we fell back, fled, escaped, because being near that battle, that clash, it would kill us, would end us, would unmake us, just from proximity, from being too close to powers we couldn't comprehend, couldn't survive, couldn't witness. Without dying, I watched from the doorway, from safety, from distance, watched Eonwe and Morgoth locked in struggle, in battle, in war, compressed into two beings, into single combat, into everything. The light and darkness, they swirled, clashed, fought, not for seconds, not for minutes, but hours of Eonwe pressing, Morgoth resisting, the throne room tearing itself apart around them, stone cracking, iron melting, reality itself straining under the weight of their conflict, and slowly, gradually, certainly, Eonwe was winning, not easily, not quickly, but winning, Morgoth's darkness retreating, shrinking, being pushed back by light, by power, by the simple fact that Morgoth had weakened himself, had spent too much, had become less than what Eonwe represented, than what the Valar commanded, than what justice required. Morgoth's movements, growing slower, heavier, more desperate. He was tiring, actually tiring, of Valar. Tiring, from exertion, from struggle, from fighting a battle he couldn't win, the darkness around him flickering, wavering, like a candle in wind, like something dying, fading, ending. Eonwe pressed harder, his light intensifying, burning, searing, driving into Morgoth's darkness, breaking it, dissolving it, ending it piece by piece, moment by moment, power by power, and then a sound from Morgoth, not words, not defiance. A groan, pain, actual pain. The Dark Lord, in pain from a wound, a strike from Eonwe's power piercing his defenses, penetrating his darkness, touching him, his essence, his core, his being. He staggered, fell to one knee, the darkness around him, guttering, failing, his massive form, shaking, trembling, trying to rise, failing, trying again, failing again. The inevitability, the dominance, the absolute power, gone, replaced by weakness, vulnerability, defeat. "You are bound," Eonwe said, not triumphant, not gloating, just stating fact, pronouncing truth, making real what was already certain. "By the will of the Valar, by the judgment of Manwë, by the doom you have brought upon yourself." And Tulkas came, the Valar of strength, of wrestling, of physical might. He'd come with the host, had fought through Angband, had waited for this moment, this confrontation, this victory. He entered the throne room, massive, powerful, laughing, actually laughing with joy, with anticipation, with the satisfaction of finally getting to do what he'd wanted for so long, for ages, for forever. "Melkor," Tulkas said, using Morgoth's old name, his true name before corruption, before fall, before everything. "I have waited so long for this." Morgoth looked up from his knees at Tulkas, and I saw it, saw in his eyes. Fear, real fear, not the fear he inspired, but fear he felt, of Tulkas, of what was coming, of what he knew, absolutely knew, was about to happen. He tried to rise, to stand, to fight, to do something, anything, but Eonwe's power held him, pressed him, kept him down, kept him weak, kept him vulnerable to what came next. Tulkas grabbed him, not with weapons, not with tools, with his hands, his strength, his power, grabbed Morgoth, the Dark Lord, the being who'd ruled Middle-earth for thousands of years, who'd broken kingdoms, who'd seemed unstoppable, eternal, inevitable. And he wrestled him, like a child, like Morgoth was nothing, mortal, weak, breakable. Morgoth struggled, fought, tried to use his power, his darkness, his malice, against Tulkas, against the Valar's strength, but it was useless, futile, pointless. Tulkas had been made for this, for strength, for wrestling, for overpowering, and Morgoth, diminished, weakened, held by Eonwa's power. He had no chance, no hope, no possibility of escape. Tulkas threw him down, face first, into the stone, into the floor of his own throne room, pinned him there, arm behind his back, knee on his neck, holding him completely, absolutely. The Dark Lord, pinned, like a criminal, like a defeated warrior, like nothing. And Morgoth, he screamed, not in pain, though there was pain, but in rage, humiliation, the absolute unbearable humiliation of being. This, being held down, being defeated, being made helpless in his own throne room by Tulkas, by a Valar he'd mocked, had dismissed, had considered, beneath him. "You are nothing," Tulkas said, laughing still, joyful still. "You were always nothing, and now everyone can see it." Others came, other Maiar, carrying chains, Ongainor, the chain that had bound Morgoth before, in the ancient days when the Valar first imprisoned him, forged by Aule the smith, made to hold, to bind, to contain even Morgoth's power, even his strength, even his everything. They brought the chains close, and Morgoth, he saw them, recognized them, remembered them from before, from his first imprisonment, from when he'd been bound and helpless and reduced to this, to nothing. "No," he said, his voice, not commanding, not powerful, but desperate, actually desperate. "No, you cannot, I will not, I refuse." But refusal meant nothing, changed nothing. Tulkas held him. Eonwa's power suppressed him, and the chains, they came, link by link, wrap by wrap, around his wrists, binding them together. Tight, unbreakable, the metal. It wasn't normal metal, it was forged with power, with the Valar's will, with something that could hold. Even Morgoth, he struggled against them, pulled, twisted, tried to break free, tried to use his power, his darkness, his malice, to shatter the chains, to escape, to do anything except be bound, be helpless, be defeated. The chains held, tightened. The more he struggled, the tighter they became. Magic, power, built into every link, every wrap, every binding, made to contain him, made specifically, solely for him. They wrapped his arms, his legs, his chest, layer after layer, link after link, until he couldn't move, couldn't struggle, couldn't do anything except exist, bound, helpless, completely and utterly defeated. And I watched his face as the chains took hold, as the reality, the absolute, undeniable reality, settled in, that this was happening, that he had lost, actually lost, been defeated, bound, ended. Surprise. That was what I saw. Genuine surprise. Like he'd never, not once, not ever, actually believed that it was possible, that he could fail, that his dominion, his power, his corruption could be stopped. But it had been. Was. He was bound, helpless, being dragged from his throne, from his fortress, from everything he'd built, everything he'd corrupted, everything he'd made his. They pulled him up, to his feet, forced him to stand, in chains before his throne, before the host, before everyone, the Dark Lord, in chains, defeated, broken, humiliated beyond measure, and he wept, not tears. He didn't have tears, but his face, his expression, it was broken, devastated, the absolute grief of someone who had believed, utterly believed, that they were destined to win, to rule, to dominate forever, and now seeing, knowing, understanding that they'd lost, that it was over, that everything they'd worked for, fought for, corrupted themselves for, it was gone, ended, destroyed. "Melkor," Eonwe said, addressing him, by his true name, his uncorrupted name, "you are judged by the Valar, by Mornwe, by all who witnessed your crimes, your corruption, your devastation. You are found guilty of all charges, of all evil, of all malice, and you are sentenced to exile, to removal, to casting out beyond the world, beyond time, beyond everything, into the void, where you will remain forever, alone, powerless, until the end of days." Morgoth said nothing, couldn't say anything, just stared at Eonwe, at the host, at the world, like he was memorizing it, recording it, holding it one last time before the end. They dragged him out of the throne room of his fortress, through the halls he'd ruled, past the bodies of those who died defending him, past everything he'd built, everything he'd made, everything that was his. And I followed. We all followed. The host, needing to see, to witness, to know, to confirm that this was real, that Morgoth, the Dark Lord, the first, the greatest, the being who'd seemed eternal, unstoppable, inevitable. He was bound, defeated, ended. They brought him outside Angband, into the light, the sun, the world he'd tried to corrupt, tried to dominate, tried to make his, and he flinched from the light, from the sky, from freedom, from everything he'd tried to destroy. The Valar's judgment was pronounced. Eonwe spoke it, made it real, made it final. Morgoth, Melkor, first of the Ainur to fall, to corrupt yourself, to mar creation, you are condemned, cast out, removed from the world, from time, from everything. You will be thrust through the door of night, into the void, beyond the circles of the world, beyond reach, beyond return, forever, eternally, absolutely. Morgoth didn't speak, didn't protest, didn't react, just stared at the sky, at the world, at everything, like he was holding it, one last time, before the end. They opened it, the door of night, a rent in reality, in existence, a gap between the world and nothing, the void, the space outside creation where nothing existed, where nothing could exist, where Morgoth would be cast, thrown, sealed forever. I saw through the door, for just a moment, just a glimpse. Nothing. Not darkness, not absence, but void. True void where even darkness, even absence couldn't exist. Just nothing. Eternal, infinite, absolute, nothing. They threw him through. Tulkas, laughing still, joyful still, satisfied. Through Morgoth, bound, chained, helpless. Through the door, into the void, into nothing, and sealed it, closed it, locked it with power, with wards, with everything that would keep him there, keep him contained, keep him ended, for all time, for all ages, for forever. Morgoth was gone, cast out, defeated, the Dark Lord, the first, the greatest, the being who'd ruled Middle-earth for thousands of years, gone, ended, removed from existence, from the world, from everything. We stood, the host, in silence, watching the sealed door, understanding, accepting that it was over, that we'd won, that Morgoth was finished, defeated, cast out, that the war, the 40 years, the thousands dead, it had been worth it, had achieved what it needed to, had ended him. But in the chaos, in the throne room during the battle, I'd seen something, someone, a figure, standing in the shadows behind Morgoth's throne. Tall, powerful, fair, too fair, beautiful even, watching, waiting. Sauron, Morgoth's lieutenant, his chief servant, his most trusted weapon, the being who'd done so much of Morgoth's work, who'd built so much of his power, who'd been second, always second, but powerful, dangerous, capable of almost everything Morgoth was. When the battle turned, when Eonwe's light broke through Morgoth's darkness, when Tulkas entered, when it became clear, absolutely clear, that Morgoth would lose, would fall, would be defeated. Sauron, he moved, slipped away, into the shadows, into the chaos, into escape. I saw him, realized what he was doing, tried to shout, to alert someone, to stop it. "Sauron, he's escaping! Someone stop!" But the throne room, it was collapsing, crumbling under the weight of the battle, of powers too great for stone to contain. Dust, debris, bodies, chaos everywhere, my voice lost in it, drowned by stone falling, by people screaming, by everything ending. I tried to follow, pushed through the chaos, through the fleeing orcs, through the collapsing halls, trying to track him, to stop him, to prevent what I knew, what I understood, would happen if he escaped. But Sauron was a Maya, was powerful, was ancient, was everything I wasn't. He moved like shadow, like mist, through passages I couldn't see, couldn't follow, couldn't navigate, and the fortress, it was breaking, falling, collapsing around us, making pursuit impossible, making anything except escape impossible. I reached a courtyard, outside, looked around, frantically, desperately, for any sign, any trace, any indication of where he'd gone. Nothing. He was gone, vanished, escaped into Middle-earth, into hiding, into whatever hole he could find, to wait, to survive, to endure while his master was judged. Cast out, ended. I found a captain, grabbed him. "Sauron, he escaped. We have to—" "Morgoth is defeated," the captain said. Not listening, not caring, too focused on the victory, on the end, on everything we'd achieved. The Dark Lord is bound, the war is won. That's all that matters. But his servant will be found later, when the host can search, can hunt, can track him down. Right now. Now we celebrate. We've ended Morgoth, ended the greatest evil. Everything else, it can wait. But it couldn't. It shouldn't. Because Sauron, he wasn't just another servant, wasn't just another lieutenant. He was. He was everything we should have stopped, everything we should have ended when we had the chance, and we let him go, let him escape, let him survive, to become, to rise, to build his own dominion, his own terror, his own ring, thousands of years later, when we thought, when we believed, that evil had been ended, that Morgoth's defeat meant peace, meant safety, meant the world was free. We were wrong, because his servant, his lieutenant, his pale imitation, he endured and became what you know, what you fought, what took another age, another war, another desperate struggle to stop, the aftermath, the cost. It was unimaginable. Beleriand, the entire continent where I'd lived, where kingdoms had stood, where elves had ruled for thousands of years, it broke, shattered, sank beneath the waves, destroyed by the war, by the power unleashed, by 40 years of gods fighting. I watched it from the ships, the evacuation, as the land crumbled, started with earthquakes, tremors that wouldn't stop, that grew stronger, more violent, more devastating, buildings collapsing, mountains cracking, the earth itself rebelling against what had been done to it, against the power, the corruption, the devastation that had soaked into every stone, every tree, every inch of ground. Then the sea, rising, not gradually, not slowly, but surging, massive waves, taller than fortresses, taller than mountains, driven by something beyond nature, beyond weather, by the Valar's judgment, by their decision that Beleriand, corrupted, broken, devastated, could not remain, should not remain, must be cleansed, reset, removed. I watched cities sink, places I'd known, had lived, had loved, disappearing beneath water, forests, ancient beyond measure, submerging, vanishing, mountains, eternal, unstoppable, crumbling, falling, dissolving into the sea. Everything, everything I'd known, everything that had been Beleriand, ending, dying, being swallowed by an ocean that wouldn't stop, couldn't stop, until nothing remained, until the entire continent, the entire land, was gone, replaced by water, by waves, by emptiness where kingdoms had stood. Thousands evacuated, fled to the ships, to Lindon, to the remaining lands east, to what hadn't broken, hadn't sunk, hadn't been judged unrecoverable, families torn apart, possessions abandoned, everything left behind, to escape, to survive, to reach safety before the waves claimed them too. Some didn't make it, didn't reach the ships in time, didn't escape. I watched them, distant figures, running, fleeing, being overtaken by water, by the inexorable rising tide, disappearing, ending, casualties not of war, but of victory, of the cost of defeating Morgoth, of the price of ending him. The land sank completely. In days, maybe weeks, time became meaningless. There was just watching, witnessing, understanding that Beleriand, home, everything, was gone, ended, replaced by an ocean that stretched to the horizon, that covered everything, that left no trace, no evidence, no memory except what we carried, what we remembered, what we would never forget. Some went to Valinor, returned to the undying lands, to peace, to safety, to forgetting, to leaving Middle-earth behind forever. Because what was there to stay for? The land was broken, Morgoth defeated, the First Age over, ended, finished, but some stayed. Like me, stayed in Middle-earth, in what remained, to rebuild, to remember, to carry forward the memory, the knowledge, the understanding of what we'd faced, what we'd defeated, what we'd lost to achieve it. I watched the sun set over the ocean where Beleriand had been, and I thought about Morgoth, bound, cast into the void, ended forever, the greatest evil defeated, removed, finished, and I thought about Sauron, escaped, hidden, somewhere in Middle-earth, surviving, planning, waiting for his chance to rise, to become what Morgoth was, to rule, to dominate, to corrupt. Again, we'd won, but we hadn't. Not completely, not finally. We'd defeated the master, but let the servant escape. And I knew, standing there, watching Beleriand's grave, that this wasn't over. That Sauron would rise, would build his own dominion, would become the Dark Lord, the enemy. Everything Morgoth had been. And I was right. I lived through the Second Age, watched Sauron rise, forge the ring, dominate Middle-earth for thousands of years. Watched him become what you know, what you fought, what took another war, another quest, another desperate struggle to stop, because we let him escape, focused on Morgoth, on the greater evil, and missed the lesser, the one who would endure. I saw Morgoth punished, saw him bound, saw him cast out, saw justice finally served on the Dark Lord, the first, the greatest, the worst. And I saw Sauron escape, saw him survive, saw him endure to become your nightmare, your enemy, your Dark Lord. That's what happened at the War of Wrath, at the end of the First Age, when we won everything and lost the chance to finish it, to end it, to stop what was coming. I'm sorry for letting him escape, for not stopping him when we could have, when we should have, when it would have saved everything that came after. I'm sorry if you want to hear more tales from the ancient wars of Middle-earth, from those who faced evils greater than Sauron, from those who witnessed the reshaping of the world. Please subscribe to Whispers from the Past. There are countless stories from the First Age, from the wars that broke continents, from the battles against Morgoth himself. Subscribe and journey with us through the deepest histories of Tolkien's world.